Namaste and greetings. I, Ayush Verma, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्था, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to the IMPRI Web Policy Talk. Today, we gather for a panel discussion on women's rights, human rights. A reflective panel discussion on the significance of recognizing women's rights as fundamental human rights, marking Human Rights Day, organized by the IMPRI Gender Impact Study Center on the occasion of Human Rights Day. This online panel discussion underscores a fundamental truth: women's rights are human rights. Bringing together experts, scholars, and practitioners, the session examines how this principle continues to inform current struggles from gender equality, dignity, and justice. While legal reforms and decades of activism have led to significant progress, women, especially in India, still face entrenched discrimination, widespread violence, and barriers to fully participate in social, economic, and political life. The discussion traces the historical evolution of women's human rights, highlights persistent gaps in law and policy, and calls attention to the pressing need for stronger accountability and effective implementation. By integrating lived experience with policy insights, this session seeks to deepen understanding of the intersection realities shaping women's life. It invites participants to reflect on pathways to advance right-based approaches, strengthen empowerment, and move towards a full future where equality and justice are truly universal. The chair and moderator, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, visiting distinguished professor IMPRI. Today, expert panelists include Dr. Vahida Nainar ji, independent researcher, gender and human rights consultant, senior fellow IMPRI; Professor Anuradha M. Chenoy ji, adjunct professor at Jindal School of International Affairs, Jindal Global University; former dean at School of International Study, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi; Dr. Sanjida Arora ji, senior research officer, Center for Inquiry into Health and Allied Themes; Dr. Amar Jesani ji, independent researcher and teacher, bioethics in public health, editor, India Journal of Medical Ethics, visiting senior fellow, IMPRI. The conveners of the programs are Dr. Simi Mehta ji, Dr. Arjun Kumar ji. To begin today's discussion, I'm honored to invite Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, chair and moderator, to share her opening remarks. We welcome you, ma'am, and over to you.
Thank you all for on this very important historic occasion of commemoration of International Human Rights. And I welcome all the panelists, Professor Anuradha Chenoy, Dr. Vahida Nainar, Dr. Sanjida Arora, and Dr. Amar Jesani. First of all, I would like to offer my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Arjun Kumar and Dr. Simi Mehta for taking initiative to organize this panel discussion, and coordinator Priyanka Niki and moderator Ayush Verma for their work, and also doing the preparatory work. We all know that discourse on human rights became very serious after the two world wars, where the Universal Declaration of Human Rights were adopted by the war-torn countries. And it was Dr. Hansa Mehta who brought up this issue of women's concerns within the human rights, because it was earlier, it was considered to be Universal Declaration of Man. So from that time, the pressure to challenge the patriarchal biases in the human rights discourse has always been there. Collective voices of women have seen to it that progressively our horizons of human rights, they become more and more wider and inclusive. In 1967, we had United Nations member states adopted Declaration on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, and it was ratified in 1979, where the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination of Women was adopted. In 1993, in the World Conference on Human Rights, which was held in Vienna, where the women's movement and women's rights activists, they mobilized to ensure that women's human rights are fully on agenda of the international community. under a rallying cry of women's rights are human rights. Before that, we all remember that even the human rights organizations were not ready to acknowledge any of the issues. Even when they talked about war, it was the prisoners' rights or it was about the territorial integrity of the nation state, but women's concerns were not included in the human rights discourses and human rights action agenda. Especially like the issues of violence against women, civil society activists organized tribunals to put the spotlight on violation of women's rights. We had so many public hearings globally, regionally, as well as in India during the International Women's Decade. And we also, as a result, which culminated into the Vienna Declaration and Program of Action, which stated that human rights of women and girls are an inalienable, integral, indivisible part of universal human rights. And they place particularly heavy emphasis on eliminating all forms of gender-based violence. And it was also accepted unanimously that the 1 week, one fortnight, like from 25th November to 10th of December, we should focus on women's rights. And each time the themes may vary. And it also, from 1993 to 2025, we have seen that women's groups, state and non-state actors, civil society organizations, they particularly focus on varied forms of exclusion, subordinations, discrimination, and injustices that women have to face. Today we have all 4 panelists. They are extremely grounded in the day-to-day issues regarding women's rights, and also they are public intellectuals. They have done a lot of work, and they are also globally they are recognized in terms of the comparative scenario and what are the best practices that we have so far as challenging the gender stereotypes, injustices that women are facing because of structural, systematic, and interpersonal violence they face in their lives. So first we begin with Dr. Anuradha Chenoy, and I would like to ask you, ma'am, that what is the balance sheet of efforts of the state and civil society organizations for expanding the scope of women's rights after official mandate in 1993 on women's rights as human rights in Vienna Congress? And what is the current situation regarding women's rights worldwide?
Thank you, Professor Patel and IMPRI and colleagues. I'm very honored to be here. And I think straight off the answer to your question, I just want to quote the UN experts on Palestinian women. 2 major, and we cannot talk of human rights and women's human rights today without referring to these 2 reports on what is happening and continues to happen on the Gaza Strip, and the fate of these women being decided by men, either Hamas and the actions that they wanted to take, by the neo-colonialist apartheid regime of men in Israel, and those who are making the peace plan. I didn't see a single woman in that. Trump, his son-in-law, his best friend, etc., who have negotiated this so-called peace plan. But in any case, just to read a small thing, which I think if we're talking of human rights, we need to look at these reports and these concerns and express our solidarity. Where this report of UN experts, they have said that Palestinian women and girls have reportedly been arbitrarily executed in Gaza, often together with family members, including their children. The experts express serious concern about arbitrary, meaning without any legal procedure, detention of hundreds of Palestinian women and girls, including human rights defenders, journalists, and humanitarian workers chosen as women and their profession, or being women, and being reportedly subject to inhuman and degrading treatment, denied menstruation pads, food, medicine, severely beaten. On at least 1 occasion, Palestinian women were detained in Gaza, were allegedly kept in a cage in the rain and cold. And this goes on. It's so horrific that one doesn't feel like really even reading it, leave alone seeing the videos which document this. So, and you can see this report, it's by Reem Al-Salem, and of course, the wonderful Francesca Albanese, who are the special rapporteurs. So really, this gets us back to what Professor Patel began with, that, these are these human rights today, and all the civil rights are based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which, as we know, was framed, formed, executed by men with a few inputs by women like Shaista Begum, Hansa Mehta, and others. But ultimately, this continued to form this framework, this so-called universal, because the universal was actually patriarchal. It was so universal because it was so consciously accepted that what is patriarchal is universal, and everyone either should adhere to this, or if they are not, they are either problematic, they are dissidents, or they're on the margins. But however, women struggled back, especially women in civil society, women's movements, since the 40s, 50s, 60s, and it went on, to have their claims and their rights as part of human rights discourse. And it was actually more than a century-long engagement of this feminist discourse with international institutions and in the civil and public spaces, in the civil society and in the multilateral spaces, which did result in some international gender regimes based on mandates such as the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights of 1966. Then they struggled to get rape recognized as a war crime in the additional protocols of the Geneva Conventions in 1977. So you can, of course, it was there in the Geneva Conventions of 1949, but as liable to prosecution under customary law, it only got recognized in 1977, and it is still, women are struggling for its implementation, as you've seen in the International Court of Justice and the case of Israeli behavior in Gaza. Then there was a convention on the elimination of discrimination against women, and the Beijing Declaration, and so on, which you can look at. But despite all this, violence against women, that is gender-based violence, violence because they're of a particular gender, remains the most egregious form of human rights violation. This is how women face exclusion, and this continues. In fact, on March 6 this year, just a few months ago, the UN reported that women and girls' rights are facing unprecedented growing threats worldwide, with higher levels of discrimination, to weaker legal protections and less funding for programs and institutions. And this UN Women's Report of 2025 actually shows that even 30 years after the Beijing platform, there is a worldwide backlash. So we're not just going forward, there's also a backlash where only 87 countries have ever sent a woman to a multilateral institution. A woman or girl is killed every 10 minutes by a partner. Social media spreads harmful stereotypes, and the digital benefits, even those, there is a digital gender gap. Then moreover, in the last decade, there is a 50% increase of women living under conflict. So in every situation, women are facing obstructions to equality and our goal of equality, and that's a denial of human rights. You look at our labor reports, which have just come out from the government of India, and we're delighted that women in informal and labor has actually increased in India dramatically, but increased how much? from 23% to 47%. That means, and in this also, other feminist economists have shown that this increase is likely because the way the statistics were generated, in which even women who are not getting paid and are part of family businesses are now shown as being part of the labor. Of course, they are. Even women who are working at home and cleaning and caregiving, that's also labor, but it needs to be recognized. So the Civicus report, for example, which just came yesterday, said that people in 83 countries and territories now live with their freedoms routinely denied and closed and repressed civic spaces, compared to 67 in 2020. So there is a regression as far as overall rights are concerned, and even a more regression when women's rights are concerned. And
Do you
now I
see
just want to
any incremental successes?
in some countries, like I was very happy to see in this report that there were upgrades in countries like Gabon, Mauritania, and Senegal, whereas downgrade in the US and EU, where women's rights and their right to reproductive freedoms have actually been legally destroyed in a sense. The Roe versus Wade judgment and other such things have gone backwards. And here before I conclude, I'm just going to give 2 points. And one is a quote from this great billionaire co-founder of the giant AI tech, Palantir. And just yesterday, he said that he was very happy that Mr. Trump was bombarding these fishing boats. He fully endorsed that. And if it was him, if he was in power, he'd do public hanging, because he said the world needs more masculine leadership. So this Palantir is a funder of the current regime, the Trump regime. So my last point is that why is this happening? Why this backlash? And my own analysis and assessment is that we can have a lot of description and statistics, but the reason is, and we need to look at the root causes and reason. And my assessment is that because of this kind of neoliberal capitalism and search for endless profit, creates these oligarchies. And you can see these oligarchies in every country. Name a country which doesn't have it. I'd be happy to get that. And these oligarchies control and want political power because they depend on state contracts, as that state is the biggest contractor, and it's also linked to the military industrial complexes and a culture of militarism linked masculinity, which feminists show intersect with race and class. And therefore, there is a need to marginalize feminists and women. Yes, women who adapt to masculinity, women who promote militarism, like let's say the spokesperson for Donald Trump, she's a woman. She promotes this kind of militarist masculinity. They are acceptable. So it's a certain kind of woman who is, this kind of is acceptable. Whereas the space for others, whether they are dissenters, minorities, racial or sexual minorities, other and women, you're going to face this backlash. And lastly, I'd say that therefore the women's movement, feminists and men who are progressive and who are with other social movements need to support this movement, because without women's rights and human rights, the whole human race is doomed. Women are the protectors of the earth and very close to climate, etc. I'm not going to go into that, but I conclude on this note. Thank you very much.
I think you talked about oligarchy, but I think I would call when it comes to giving anything to rights to the women, they are monopolistic, and when they have to extract labor, they are monopolists. I think that's what we are seeing with the transnational corporation, multinational corporation, the massive merger and acquisitions which are taking place. The people's rights, especially women's rights, who are at the bottom of the pyramid, they are going to be violated. So we have to see the women's question and women's rights in the context of, as you said, the political economy, and also how the world capitalism is becoming more and more extractivist. It has lost its progressive content in every means. It was always exploitative, but it was generating something. Now it is not. It's only taking away, extracting everything from mother, from people, and especially for women. There's so much of wage theft is taking place because none of the existing laws are also implemented. Now, thank you, Dr. Chenoy. I would like to now come to Dr. Vahida Nainar, and I would ask you, because you have been in the women's movement for nearly 4 decades, and I would like to know that from the perspective of feminist movement, how would you evaluate policies and action agendas that fulfill demand of women's rights to be treated as human rights? You can speak about India. You can also give the comparative scenario because you are a well-traveled person and you have done a lot of work in several developing countries. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Vibhuti. Thank you very much. Again, it's a honor and a privilege to be here as part of an IMPRI panel again on this very important topic on women's rights or human rights. And yes, and when I was approached for this panel, to be part of this panel, I recalled my my participation at the very historic high-profile tribunal on women's human rights violation that happened at the second UN World Conference on Human Rights in Vienna in 1993. And yes, women have been really making efforts for a long time to get women's agenda within the human rights framework, and that was really not happening. And while women, particularly the movement, which was the women's human rights, making women's rights as human rights, the slogan has been used quite in several campaigns in the global South. It was at this conference that that slogan took root. And I would say in part that particular tribunal was very, very powerful in getting that declaration, the Vienna, that sentence in the Vienna Declaration that you read out, Vibhuti. So, so yes, since then, there is this thing, and it gives power to women's movement, give power to women's movement around the world as an important tool to reframe their struggles as universal human rights, and rather than gendered one only, they were affected because of their gender, but their struggle is universal. In terms of your question as to how one, or how would one assess the policies and frameworks and all that from a human rights framework, we can talk about what are the key concepts within this statement of women's rights or human rights, first of all. And then, these could be the criteria against which any kind of policies could be assessed, and to the extent to which that they are indeed inclusive and they are indeed addressing women's rights as human rights. First concept would be the universality of human rights. It reaffirms that the concept that reaffirms that women's human rights are universal and should not be undermined by arguments of culture, traditions, religious extremism, or any other kinds of to justify harmful practices against women, like, for example, child marriage, or no education for girls, as in Taliban, or female genital mutilation. Many harmful practices which are justified in the name of religion, culture, tradition, and that kind of this concept undermines that existing thing, that so the human rights is the universality of human rights. The second is that the concept is addresses the public-private divide. This, of course, as we know, refers to the historical interpretation of human rights law that traditionally focused scrutiny on and state obligations, primarily on actions committed by state agents in the public sphere. But since the women's movement, particularly in the 80s and 90s, has strongly criticized this traditional interpretation, arguing that it resulted from a male bias that has perpetuated violations of women's human rights, particularly gender-based violence, that often occurred in private spaces like the home. So this was what the cutting of the public-private divided, and that is now, it is now widely accepted since the inclusion of understanding of women's rights as within the framework, human rights framework, that states' obligations extend to protecting women from violations by third parties, including the private sphere, and are required to take positive steps to fulfill women's human rights. So this shift is governed by what is called the due diligence standard, which requires the state to prevent, prosecute, punish, and compensate for violations, even those committed by private actors. So this whole concept of due diligence is very important. And it was since then that after this, that after this movement and the push by women's right activists, that even CEDAW introduced the General Recommendation 19 and included the due diligence standard and obligated states that they have an obligation to prevent, prosecute, and punish. So that is another very important kind of concept of this understanding of women's rights as human rights. The next one is non-discrimination and equality between women and men. So this focuses on de jure, or rather direct legal discrimination, and addressing at the same time de facto, which is indirect or in real discrimination. And the core concept within this, when you look at the word equality there, refers to substantive equality or equality in results, which requires positive action and temporary measures special measures to counteract historical disadvantages, that women have been enduring because of the patriarchal society that we all live in. The next would be the concept of equality against the concept of equity. In international human rights treaties, the term equality is central, legally binding standard, and equality between men and women, or gender equality, means that all human beings, regardless of sex, are free to develop their personal abilities, pursue their careers, make choices without the limitations set by stereotypes, rigid gender roles, and prejudices. Equity, on the other hand, is considered a moral imperative to dismantle unjust differences based on fairness and justice, often requiring a focus on most disadvantaged. The term equity is a malleable concept that is not legally binding. And therefore, for example, CEDAW has also emphasized that states should use exclusively the concept of equality of women and men and gender equality, and avoid using the concept of gender equity when implementing their obligations under the convention, as equality is a legal term that cannot be replaced by subjective concept of equity. Then the next would be the idea of gender analysis. Gender, as we know, refers to the socially constructed identities, attributes, roles for women and men, which often result in hierarchical and unequal relationships. So gender analysis of this is essential to understand the differential experiences of human rights violation and to address that differential experiences of women and men when violations occur. The next, of course, the concept is of intersectionality and multiple forms of discrimination. This recognizes that discrimination based on sex does not occur in isolation, but is often compounded by or intersects with other factors, leading to unique and heightened forms of vulnerability for certain groups of women. It could be, for example, girls from poor community, rural community, minority with disability. All of them require special attention to ensure their rights to education. Or discrimination based on sex is often, of course, as we know, combined with discrimination based on caste, class, racial or ethnic background, religion, national origin. And so these are broadly the concepts that one can kind of use to assess programs, policies, from whether they are within the human rights framework. And human rights frameworks, understanding women's rights as human rights and applying that framework to specific areas of life has led to certain rights as we know of today. So the framework is kind of applied to, for example, applied to in a public and political life, addresses the historic exclusion and continuing underrepresentation on women in political and public life, despite nearly universal suffrage. So the practical barriers to participation include stereotyping, traditional roles, the double burden of work, the lack of resources. So now to address that, states are increasingly using quotas and special measures to boost women's participation to achieve what, as we discussed, substantive equality. Another area in which the human rights framework is applied, and we've seen that, is sexual health and reproductive rights, which is intrinsically linked to multiple human rights, including right to life, freedom from torture, and right to health. Violations are frequent and include denying access to services, forced procedures, female genital mutilation, early marriages, often stemming from patriarchal values that prioritize women's reproductive role. The key issues include over here in terms of human rights is women's right to decide freely and responsibly on the number and spacing of their children, for example, which is included in CEDAW Article 16, access to accurate information on contraception, comprehensive sex education, and ensuring access to safe and affordable services. Informed consent for medical procedures mandatory. See, these are all the parts of rights as human rights. Then you have women's right as an adequate standard of living. It covers the right to land, property, housing, food, water, sanitation, decent work, social security. These rights are critical for women's equality and well-being in every wherever women are. The link between domestic violence and the right to housing, adequate housing, is specifically highlighted, noting that violence is a leading cause of women's homelessness. For food, water, and sanitation, for example, the women are proportionately affected by lack of access and stigma, such as those surrounding around menstruation, which can impede girls' education. And then violence against women, which was the issue that emphasized and popularized women's rights as human rights, is again defined as any act gender-based violence that result in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or psychological harm in both public and private life. The human rights framework acknowledges that violence stems from historically unequal power relations. States have a due diligence obligations, which I have already spoken of, and that's a huge part, which prior to that did not quite exist. They tell about what states are obligated to against the public actors, but not private actors. That's one of the key change. And of course, another impact is about impact on migration and displacement also. Here also, all individuals under the jurisdiction of states, regardless of migration status, have human rights. And migrant women in detention face risk of sexual violence. Discrimination bans women's migration, can force them into irregular channels, leaving them vulnerable to abuse by traffickers, for example. And then, of course, as we have already seen, a couple of more areas one is the women's human rights in conflict and crisis. As we have already seen, women, more than a lot of women are in conflict areas, and it leads to severe form of gender-based violence, rape, sexual slavery, often used as tactics of war. International jurisprudence, notably from Rwanda and former Yugoslavia, and now the ICC, has now recognized and defined wartime sexual violence and as war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And similarly, the Security Council Resolution 1325, is, as we know, landmark for demanding protection of women, girls, ending impunity, increasing women's participation and representation in the whole women, peace, and security agenda. And then finally, the women's access to justice. So it guarantees women's equality before law and providing effective remedies for violence. So states have a duty to provide legal aid, ensure training for judicial personnel in gender sensitivity, and adopt measures such as specialized courts or one-stop centers to make justice accessible. So these are broadly some of the ways in which one can, address this. And I will conclude on that note.
Yeah. So, Vaidaji, where you have given us a collective wisdom of the women's movement globally as well as in India. The moral of the story is that okay, you have very progressive laws and so many conventions which the nation states are signing, but when it comes to implementation, it is always the pressure from the women's movement, and that is very important. We saw even in Millennium Development Goal number 3 on gender equality, did not mention gender-based violence. It only gave the indicators were only on education, health, employment, and
Maternal
political
mortality.
participation, but not gender. And it was the women's movement which had to pressurize to include that, and it was corrected in Sustainable Development Goal. And all this global thinking, women's movement is always right from last 30 years. We have been saying think globally, act locally. We have to learn from each other's experiences. Earlier, during 75 to 85, we could personally go to all those countries and interact and see and have exposure program and all. Now that has reduced drastically because of all the nation states are curtailing funds for the civil society organizations, and even the capitalist crisis, the world capitalism has also created so much precarity for the common people that this kind of things are not even considered to be priority, because only ease of business is considered to be the priority. And as Professor Chenoy told about the military industrial complexes are also creating. But now in last 4-5 years, we see that localization of sustainable development goal, that has become a mantra. And so many organizations, all those 17 goals and 612 indicators, how in a different way they are implementing. And here we have an expert, Dr. Sanjida Arora, who has dedicated best years of her life for working on gender-based violence and one-stop crisis center. I would like to know that how has your organization over last 30 years brought this issue on a national platform, how you began with the local Bombay, and then how you are taking this collective wisdom at a national level. Yeah, over to Sanjida. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Vibhuti. Sehat, which is a Mumbai-based research organization, has been involved in advancing human rights for more than 30 years. And our focus is to look at the intersection of gender violence and health. And key areas where Sehat has worked on advancing women's rights are, recognizing and addressing violence against women as a public health issue. Uh, so Sehat was the organization which was involved in establishing Dilasa, which is a hospital-based crisis department in collaboration with Bombay Municipal Corporation in year 2000. And the rationale behind situating a crisis intervention department within the health system was that violence against women has health consequences, and often the health system is the first place where the women will come for seeking the health care. And if we introduce an intervention at the level of the health system, then we have an opportunity to help women and support her for any kind of support services that are required for addressing the violence. And the LASA model is not only about establishing a crisis intervention, also to work with the healthcare providers. And one of the main focus area here is to build the capacity of the healthcare workers to provide a gender sensitive healthcare. And we all know that a sensitive and very rigorous implementation cases of sexual violence is very important for survivors to access justice. So one of our focus is also to work with the healthcare workers and to see that the health is not only a biomedical issue, but also see it from a social determinants perspective. And another key area where Sehat has worked in this context is transforming the medical education. So we have worked with the medical colleges and medical educators to bring substantial changes in the medical curriculum. And the rationale behind this approach is that, to build the capacity of the future doctors to look at the health inequities, and also recognize that women is not a single category, to provide, to recognize the intersectionality and provide a sensitive and contextualized medical and sensitive care. We have also worked on advancing sexual and reproductive health rights of women, and we have worked on, unconditional like abortion access of women, irrespective of age, marital status, sex selection. We have also worked on, and one of the area where we have worked with the health system is, mistreatment faced by the pregnant women in the labor room. So there is a lot of literature, specifically from low middle income countries, saying that pregnant women face a lot of violence when they reach to the labor room, and most of the time this violence is justified by saying that these are for better health or pregnancy outcomes. And we have worked with the government health facilities to advance respectful maternity care by, establishing the standard operating protocols within the health system. Also, Sehat engaged in a PIL with the state of Maharashtra to advocate for the rights of the survivors of the sexual violence, and our work resulted in the development of a gender sensitive protocol for the medical legal examination of the sexual violence survivors, and it was released by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. I mean, the focus of our work is basically to transform the health facilities as the sites for protecting the rights of the human of women, rather than becoming sites for the secondary harm. So the work has, I mean, focus mainly on institutionalizing the policies within the health system so that they are sustainable and intersectional in nature. Yeah, so Dr. Vibhuti, these were the few of the areas where
Yeah.
Sehat has worked.
Why you also have started working on the cyber crimes? Why did you consider it to be very important concern? At a ground level, did you encounter the problems? Because just now, 2 days back, we saw a full page report based on Sehat's research.
Yeah, I mean, so as I said that Sehat has been involved in establishing crisis intervention department in the hospital, and over the last few years, we have seen that the landscape of the violence faced by the women has changed, and the use of digital technology or cyber crime is one of the trend that we have seen. A lot of cases are coming where women are you know providing the history where the even in the intimate relationship, the photographs have been shared without her consent, and a lot of violations have been done. And so we see that as a crisis intervention department which is located within the hospital, it's important to look the at the trend of this form of violence faced by the women, and also to respond appropriately, and also the kind of the intervention that is required in these kind of cases is very different from domestic violence cases and the sexual violence cases. And I would not say that the digital violence or the is happening in isolation. So there is often a overlap of domestic violence and digital violence, and then you sexual violence and the digital violence. Since it has a different legal framework, and also the expectations of the survivors are quite different in these kind of the cases, so it's important for us to respond to them appropriately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you said that you basically work with the professionals like doctors and health workers. How do you reach out to the larger community and those who are actually practitioner and community-based organization? Is there any conscious intervention strategy?
As I said, that the focus of our organization's work is to bring institutional changes, which are sustainable and more transformative rather than, going into the direct services, which we are all also doing. And through this process of, building institutional changes, one way of engaging with the community-based organizations or the NGOs is to build their capacity for the accountability of the institutions. So just, I mean, to
How you
carry
are scaling your work? How you
uh,
are, how could you reach out to other states and other districts in Maharashtra?
I mean, the the approach is to, establish the evidence-based models, doing implementation research, and then advocating with the bureaucrats to look at the data and the evidence, and then, provide technical support to them in developing the resources, establishing the intervention, and also, I mean, adapting and contextualizing the intervention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now I think Dr. Sanjida brought in the focus role of public health system, and here we would like Dr. Amar Jesani, who has been in the field of health research and health action for over 5 decades. You can see right from the Bangladesh war, where all the doctors they went to the border and started Medical Friends Circle in 1971. I would like to know that to what kind of changes you are seeing in last 50 years so far as the women's rights are concerned and the response of the public health practitioners and the health activists. Yeah.
Well, I think the previous three speakers have laid the ground and explained that something that emerged after Second World War, with the United Nations coming out with Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and in 1960s the development of governance which were adopted in 1970s on civil and political rights and social and economic rights and cultural.
Being recorded.
I'm so sorry. I think we got disconnected somehow. I was saying that the 1970s was a time when a lot of uh, 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 people came out talking about reaching out to the communities because the government was not able to do it, and issue of reaching the unreached, the community health, as well as gradually the slogan of universal access to healthcare services were raised. So this is as this was the phase when there was an increased awareness about the right to health. However, in India, we could never make health a, a big political issue in the democratic process. So unless there is a lot of pressure from the people about getting the universal access to healthcare, there was not there won't be enough work being done on the subject. While right to education and others where people's movements were much stronger as compared to the issue related to the right to health. It is it is at the same time in from 1990s the public health systems and its importance came under attack from the government, and I think this has happened all over the world. As you will find that the universal health care systems which are set up in developed countries after Second World War, in Europe, in US and UK, the national health services, even in US through the labor activism, where at least 70 to 80% of the people got healthcare services through the union contracts and got certain basic healthcare. All those things which were happening has happened after Second World War has come under severe strain and over the years. And last 30 years, you will find that even Europe is retreating. And within that, as you can see, that the rights of the people who are more vulnerable, there may be racial minorities, there may be religious minorities, and even the other people, the migrants and others, have suffered the most. There have been efforts to point out that even during those universal access systems, as I think it was said that the universal access are patriarchal access, and that was reflected the most in the healthcare services, where the sensitivity to women's health issues was very low, even in the best of the national health system and the social security systems of the Europe. And as a consequence, the women had to campaign and come out with a lot of pressure on the system, saying that if the government system keeps discriminating them, they may have to take their own initiatives. And that's how, a lot of initiatives emerge in North America as well as Europe, where women try to sensitize the system and at the same time try to establish their own self-help groups for reproductive and other healthcare services. You will find the groups which talked about changing the attitude of the medical profession, changing the priorities within the healthcare system, within the universal access, all of them pressurizing quite a lot. And some of them went to an extreme of opposing the universal healthcare system, saying that when government is monopolizing, the government may not be very sensitive to their needs, And I think that the rebellion within the universal access by not only by women but also by the colored people, the black people, and all was very common in 1970s and 80s when I started learning about both politics of the health as well as working at the grassroots level or connecting with the grassroots level in India. So there was a pressure for the universal access system in the West to reform, and be more inclusive for women. However, at the end of 1980s, with the collapse of the USSR and Cold War, there was a massive neoliberal market-based approach dominating the scene. And what has happened is that it is trying to wipe away some of those gains of the post-Second World War, where universal access, at least basic structures were existing, getting privatized or being dominated by the private sector, with a large, bigger technologies and all. So there is a definite retreat you find that is happening within this universal system, and which is going to leave out a large number of people from its ambit. And this phenomenon is in a way you can say that is a retreat from the United Nations talk about making healthcare accessible to everybody. Um, the Universal Declaration in Article 25 talked about having the best standard of those things which actually make people healthy. It was there. It was taken up in I think the Article 12 of the Universal Declaration of social and in a covenant on social and economic rights. And in 2000, I think there was a general comment 14 which talked about the right to health or right to the right to all those things which are which are all those standards which make people healthy, right? Because you can't have right to health. You can have right to those conditions which make people healthy. That means it can be nutrition, it can be water supply, it can be healthcare is also one of them. So that development, which was taking place, is getting reversed. Where there is more market intervention with less regulation from the system to redistribute and to ensure that everybody gets the health services. So yes, there is a big attack on this taking place. The second aspect is what happens during the conflict time, because the conflict time we were discussing here. There are normal times when the violence takes place, the gender violence we have looked at, but there is also other violence, the police violence, the torture and the extrajudicial killing, which has expanded. Not only that, but where the role of the medical profession is becoming more colluding with the establishment for to prevent the justice to be done. And it is very important area of our work where medical profession should be aligning with the victim and trying to provide evidence for the justice is I think shifting its stance at the moment. The other area is the mass violence, like communal violence, and the role of the health system there. I think that is something which is not studied adequately in India, but there is a definitely indication that large number of health workers do harbor religious feelings, and during the crisis of the riot, they may not be remaining neutral as they are required to be neutral. The conflict at the international level or war-related conflict, there is a trend emerging in last few decades is that one of the ways to destroy uh, a regime which is not of the liking of the imperialist power is to destroy the health services. I think it started when I was doing documentation in 1970s. Was that it started with the Nicaragua, where Nicaragua had a revolution, and when the US wanted to destroy And one of the major attack initially that were done were on the health services, which Nicaraguans were trying to rebuild, as a part of their efforts of rebuilding the nation, along with the education and other things. But that has continued all through. And if you come to Gaza, you will find that the health services and the destruction of health services was almost absolute. There are terminologies like medicide and health side and that kind of thing being used, saying that there was an effort under the pretext that the healthcare workers may be aligned to the Palestinian resistance or Hamas, and because of that, it was necessary to destroy the healthcare hospitals and they may be hiding there, they may be carrying out attacks from there, and under those pretexts, most of that was destroyed. And large number of healthcare workers and some of the doctors who refused to leave their duty during that crisis time, they are in prison and they are being tortured, and there is a big campaign going on for their release. But one thing that is very, very clear now, that the establishment of Red Cross, the earlier understanding that during the war, the medicine will act as a neutral ground and nobody will attack the health workers who are providing care to the injured people in war, is no longer seem to be accepted, international convention in the war. So this is uh, uh, this is I think another retrograde in a movement that has taken place. So these are the certain areas which we need to pay attention to. Last point that I wanted to make was is a simple thing that we need to keep it in mind, is that as compared to civil and political rights, where we are talking about state taking action, state action and asking the state not to oppress people and do violence against people, or have regulations which ensures that this violence within the civil society is controlled through the state action. In social and economic rights, and particularly healthcare rights, in order to ensuring that people get it, you have to build a system. If you don't have a good system of healthcare services and the public health, then it is very, very difficult to deliver them. The market has been found to be completely inadequate because it is very dissipated. It has numerous players, in addition to being regulated more by the market rather than the state regulator. And of course, there is a big profit motive which makes healthcare available only for those who have purchasing power. So, in that kind of situation, in order to overcome that, you need to have a state actually intervening in order to build the system. And if the system is not built, and system remains as scattered as it is today, without having any kind of state action to coordinate it, then the healthcare access to everybody becomes very, very less, and the biggest sufferers will be children and women and the minorities and the Dalits and other people, simply because they just cannot afford to get it. And I think that is where a big change is required. In India, a large number of organizations are working on it. The Jan Swasthya Abhiyan is one of the coalition of multiple organizations trying to do it. And the Medico Friends Circle and other organizations that I am part of, they are also making their own efforts in order to counter the current trend towards corporatization and the privatization and less regulated market that is prevalent. But all the current situation definitely, right to health and right to health for the vulnerable people and women is under massive stress, and that requires a lot of work in coming time. I'll end here. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Amar Jesani. That makes our discourse very complete because we now started with the international relations and pol science perspective. Then Vaidaji gave us what women's movement has been doing. Sanjida's experience of working actually at the One Stop Crisis Center, and it is a participatory action research which creates the evidence-based policies, programs, and doable agenda for the at a subnational level. And also we got the perspective from the health professionals and what are they are doing with the civil society as well as the state wherever it's possible. And he also brought out the two aspects: state provides the services, as in case of a one-stop crisis center. At the same time, state has also played a very oppressive role, not only here but globally. So now the floor is open for the participants. I see the names of participants. Most of them have been associated with various social movements, and they are also working in a different, at a state level or at a national level. And some of them are also from many other countries. I see from the neighboring countries also they are there. So now please, you can share your experience, or you can ask questions or clarifications from the panelists. Who would like to go first? Yeah. Priyanka ji, all of them are they are part of the panel. No, now they can unmute and speak.
Yes, ma'am. We're giving the access, but they're also they can also type in the chat box or Q&A box if they want.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If you are not coming forward, then I'll go for the second round of questions. Okay.
Now I think we can.
Yeah, ask. So,
Yes.
Professor Anuradha, I would like to ask you that what is the way forward? What should we do at this juncture?
I think we need to do what we've been doing, quite frankly, because we have gone a long way. It has to be a collective, and even individual. Individual efforts have also been very important in the sense of women who've been denied rights have gone to court and they've struggled and they've fought on their own without the support of the women's movement. So I think there are multiple ways. There are individual, there are institutional, and there is the collective. Sadly, I feel that currently the Indian women's movement, I'm not seeing so much from them collectively. Earlier they used to have these 7 women's groups who are
All India group.
all
Yeah.
India
Seven
group.
sisters. Yeah.
Yes, 7, and they used to be very active, and I miss those days actually.
Yeah.
But I think individual women are still fighting in courts, and they don't give up, and they go up to the Supreme Court. I've seen so many cases on whether it's violence, whether it's harassment at the workplace, and now you do have things like POSH and compulsory things. So, and I think even institutions, what Sanjida said, her work was remarkable. And I think that's a way forward. We just continue, not stop.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Shruti Tiwari ji, would you like to go ahead? And Veda, can you take her question? How can we make women aware of their rights, like in India? Yeah.
Well, the only way to make women aware of the right is to have awareness campaigns, is to have education included in the regular education system about some level of rights that that can be passed on to the people at large. And the awareness campaign is not only from the states, definitely, but also from what we have just been saying, from women themselves, to talk about it. I remember the way the women's movement, particularly the autonomous one, got together, grew, galvanized, was having awareness, consciousness raising, as we say. So I believe that I am not sure that really happens at anymore. And I think there are some of these some of these tools that used to be quite prevalent, which helped galvanize movement. Maybe it's time to reintroduce them, both at small community levels, at larger levels, at one small community levels, at one's district level, if you're part of any organization, whichever group you're part of, that you're active with. I mean, at those level itself, one can have the awareness raising campaign and consciousness raising kind of, sessions or event. And you need to have more and more things that are happening like this. State, we talk of state involvement because state has the ability and resources and institutional resources to amplify the awareness campaign. They can, do it in a large scale. And so therefore that needs to be done. And I know a lot of women's movement partner with states for awareness raising campaigns. I know, Sehat she's mentioned that what they are doing. I know Majlis has been doing a lot of awareness campaign of rights with the Maharashtra state and others, and other groups are been doing in other parts of the country. So I think that these efforts need to continue, and there has to be more of them. I believe that's the only way to kind of continue do the awareness. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Alia Khan. Thank you, Vaidaji. Dr. Alia Khan, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Vibhuti, and it's really heartening to hear about women's rights, human rights on the Human Rights Day, because I think we need to reaffirm our pledge to this motto, I would say, in these very troubling and challenging times. My question is about political rights. Coming from Pakistan, I feel that women's political rights really have not been exercised to advocate that, women's rights are human rights. And I know that in India, there is a much stronger local government system. So I would just like any of the panelists who wishes to comment on this, that in the absence of political rights, how does one see the future of this slogan that, women's rights are human rights? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Vaida or Professor Anuradha or Amar, anybody. Yeah.
Okay, so number one, women's political rights is a very broad umbrella. It begins with the right to vote.
Yes.
In our countries, we got the right to vote with our constitutions, India, Pakistan, etc. But in the US, for example, women got the right to vote much after men. They had to struggle for it. They didn't have an automatic right to vote, even in Europe. So that's one. The second is the right to stand for election. All those rights are
But
there
Pakistan
in
has
this
quota, no? You have a quota for the apex body, electoral body, no?
Yeah, exactly.
Women's quota.
Yeah, but so we had to struggle for that there should be, and it hasn't been implemented yet. So, political rights, they're situated, embedded in patriarchal systems where women are not in leadership in political parties.
Yeah.
They, if they come into power, like let's say all our countries have had women leaders, Benazir Bhutto, Indira Gandhi, but it's because of how they were related to political and important men.
Yes.
Not because they could mobilize. Of course, in the Indian national movement, women did mobilize. But once they got independence, they didn't get, they didn't get the rights. It became for constitution first, drafted mainly by men and a couple of women, but the consciousness wasn't there. And now women in India they got 33% reservation at the local bodies, but not in state assemblies and national, and they're struggling for that. And I think women across the world are doing that, that they need some kind of affirmative action. Only then will they have the right to be in political spaces, as leaders, etc. And that's very important, because spontaneously, sometimes they get a bit of token presence, or if they're very dynamic. I mean, we do have leaders like, let's say, Mamta Banerjee and others who've risen. But no one's going to give us any kind of special political rights unless we struggle for it and ask for affirmative actions and reservations. And that's what WPS 1320 does, Women, Peace and Security. It says women must have the right to be representatives and represented in political decision making at all levels. And now there's conversation about a feminist foreign policy which argues for resources. And some states which argued for it are actually taking back the feminist foreign policy. So, it is a struggle which goes back and forth, and that's how it'll be. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And we had once upon a time Women Action Forum, and Indian Women's Movement was closely working with them. So many times we used to meet during 80s and 90s. Even that generation is also gone, no? So now they are correct. Yeah, Rajanandini Sinhaji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, madam, and good evening.
Introduce yourself. Yeah.
Yes, my name is Rajnandini Sinha, and I'm a research fellow of the Indian Institute of Democratic Leadership. And ma'am, I have two specific questions. One is, I am very deeply concerned about the women in Afghanistan, the kind of the life that they are leading. Ma'am, there's reports where, even their kitchens, which had windows, even those windows have been cemented and shut permanently because of some men from the neighborhood used to look inside the through the windows and while the women were cooking. So that's one thing. Then we find that children are just, by their parents also. They are children below the age of uh, 11, 10, they are having child marriages. How do we, ma'am, sensitize now since we have a Taliban government in place over there? And we have seen in the recent past in India that representatives of the government from Taliban, they visited India. Ma'am, what steps can we take as a nation, as women of our nation, to reach out to those women in distress in Afghanistan? We have to sensitize the government of Taliban through some measures, some efforts. Ma'am, this is one. How do we go about it? We need to really reach out to them. My second part is, ma'am, I have a very humble and sincere request to you. We are in Delhi itself, ma'am. I am concerned about the red light area that is GB Road, and we see the kind of the women, they are like just living in cages over there, in a cage. It's like, ma'am, how can we really help them? Because if we try to reach to them, then there are some men who do not allow us to meet them. They are in this brothels, the way the things work. But we have to somehow reach out to these women. And, and in a discussion, in future, in the 2026 Women Rights Day, I would like to hear from the, from the horse's mouth of a sex worker, if possible, who is a sex worker. Because unless until we don't make them a part of our discussions, I don't think we can really, really do something which is going to bring about a substantial change in their lives. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
So far as the sex workers unions are concerned in Bangalore, Kolkata, Bombay, they are quite active, and women's movement closely works with them. Their children, for their children's future, their education, the special organizations are there. And also recently, currently this year is a Golden Jubilee commemoration of women's movement in Maharashtra. In that also, all sex workers organizations in Bombay and Pune, the unions are there during the pandemic when they were ostracized and they were not given ration kit, and there were police brutality in the name of Nakabandi after their stupid Harvard study was popularized by the state. Women's organizations, human rights lawyers had taken up their case, and there is a strong camaraderie between them. And though, especially the child sex workers have been, they have been out of the profession mainly because of the support which the educationists, social workers, women's movement, and the certain section of the police who are not the rent seeker or who are not corrupt, they have worked together. So that part I can talk about.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
You know, in
Your other
Afghanistan,
question?
it's very complex because you see, on the name of protecting women, there were military interventions.
Correct.
So, and they said we would save women, and where? As soon as they left, the Taliban was back. So, patriarchy is a structure of that society, and you know, we from outside can't influence them.
No, and here when they came, Taliban leaders came, they did not allow women journalists. No, it
They
was
didn't
the
allow, and then they were
network
put
for women
pressure.
journalists that protested, and after that,
Yes,
government
because they got such a
says
bad name.
that it was in their embassy. We don't have jurisdiction in their embassy. That was the answer of the Ministry of Home Affairs.
That's right. So I think, but awareness, you know, will come. Sadly, Afghanistan is one of those cases it's fallen off the map as far as women's rights are concerned. And also in some areas where there's female genital.
FGM is there.
Yeah. That also, there at least, you know, there's a lot of conversation and pressure.
No, and whatever solidarity is happening so far as women in Afghanistan are concerned, it is happening in confidentiality, mainly to save their life, because we no use writing an annual report and boasting about what women's movement has done. Whatever is happening, it is happening this thing because we know the consequences we will not face, they will have to face. So at the level of protection, those who are crossing the border or those who want to, like mainly the educated women, they are, because they are suffocating. They don't have anything left there to do. So I think that level of support and solidarity is provided by the women's groups without any publicity or going to the media. No. But Taliban also enjoys popular support. That also we should not forget. No? There are women who are carriers of patriarchy, who have internalized misogyny and who are like valorizing patriarchal power. So that is also there. So that reality is also there. So maybe there will be more and more Malalas who will challenge this kind of a suffocative environment, because now after 6th standard, girls are not even allowed to continue education. Dr. Amar, would you like to see? We would like to hear man's voice about situation in Afghanistan. Yeah.
There is also resistance,
Yeah,
there is
internally.
resistance. Because of Taliban movement, a lot of the education particularly has gone underground.
Yes.
So they are doing in their own little spaces where it's possible. Women are coming together and educating little girls, and that kind of resistance is there. Beyond that, they are unable to come out publicly and all of that. And I must say over here that yes, there is very little, I agree, we can do from outside, to directly influence what is happening with women in Afghanistan. But I was wondering, perhaps there was something we could have done, at least as a collective women's movement. I'm not sure any, public letter was put out, when Taliban visited here before they came, from the women's movement here in India. And that was, I believe, that was a missed opportunity for showing solidarity with women in Afghanistan. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Vahida. There is a question by Ashta Naval. What alternative and right-based methods have been adopted in India to navigate socio-cultural barriers and create safer environment for women abortion seekers, as it is important factor in reproductive health of Indian women? I think Dr. Jesani has done extensive research on abortion. Would you like to answer this question?
Well, I think India is quite fortunate as far as abortion is concerned, as compared to say USA and many other countries. India abortion was decriminalized in 1971. The major drawback of the liberal abortion law in India is that it is not called an abortion law. It is called law for the medical termination of pregnancy. And this law was brought about to ensure that there is a good support available for family planning when the family planning methods fail, as well as it was also health concern of the women, because a large number of women who were accessing abortion from the informal providers were getting infected, getting into complications and dying. And something like more than 10% of maternal mortality was caused by the wrongly done abortion. So that's how this liberal abortion law came, and that allows women on certain ground, including failure of the contraception, to access abortion services. So that way, you can say that we have a political right to have abortion for the women, and that political right is quite strong so far. So far it has been very strong, and it has not come under stress from any major quarter. There are people who are opposed to abortion completely, but still they haven't been heard, and it has remained very strong, law to this day. It has also expanded its scope in the sense that when we started, the abortion was permissible only up to 20 week of gestation. Now you can have it up to 24, and it can go even up to 28 if there are special circumstances. So there is an improvement which took place in last 5 years. The negative aspect of the abortion law in India is that it is not a socio-economic excess. As I said, the political excess is there. That means that if you go and get the abortion done in a private services, the government will not automatically reimburse it. The economic right means that a woman seeks abortion anywhere, the payment for that will be done by the state. So that kind of universal access to abortion is not there. And a large number of women prefer to go to the private sector simply because they are concerned about the lack of confidentiality in the government system. So that is, and the government system at the rural areas level, they do not have good facilities to do the abortion. The abortion access has increased for technological reason too. There is a medical abortion available now, up to 7-9 weeks of gestation. When just taking abortion pills, we can start the abortion process. But it also requires some good service support in case there is incomplete abortion and woman requires support there. The last but most important part is the cultural aspect of the abortion. And when you are talking about the barrier to abortion seeking, I think it is related to the cultural part. And despite having a liberal abortion law since 1971 in India, there is a strong stigma against abortion in India. You cannot talk about abortion. If a woman has undergone abortion, she will not, in publicly say that I have just got the abortion done. People will consider it to be a bad thing to do. That is one reason why you will find even married women who have a legitimate reason to fake abortion for the failure of contraception will not undergo abortion close to where they are living. They will go far away from it so that the people in the immediate neighborhood do not come to know about it. And it becomes worse if a woman is not married, if woman is a divorcee, or she is a widow, or her husband is living elsewhere as a migrant labor, and coming only once in a year back home, and then she undergoes abortion. So all those kind of things are the major issue, and because of the stigma, it takes a longer time within the family to decide about undergoing abortion, and also to find the right kind of provider where woman feels safe in terms of both safety of abortion as well as safety of her confidentiality is a struggle. So that is where I think things are going wrong, and that's where we have to concentrate. We have to concentrate on the socio-economic rights of abortion rather than. And one thing that we should keep it in mind is that all religions are against abortion. I haven't found a single religion so far. I studied all of them in relation to abortion, and I found that all of them oppose it. In Hindu religion, if you read the religious text, it talks about Jivatma, which is from the very beginning as a life and a human life. And so it is as bad or is a strong concept as Catholics have about the abortion. Islam and other religion, they talk about the soul coming after few weeks, but otherwise there are also strong restriction, and most of the Islamic countries do not have a liberal abortion law. So in India, we are very fortunate that despite all religion being opposed to abortion, the abortion still has remained more liberal for women. But future may or may not be very bright, because our Indian society is also becoming very religious. In addition to that, I am also observing that our providers, the doctors who do the abortion, they are also becoming very religious, and so they try to opt out from providing abortion services. And whenever the formal health system is not providing care in a liberal way, the women try to go to the informal services, which is unsafe. And so that has its own consequences. And the past, which was really very bad for women's health in terms of abortion, may get repeated. So we have to be very alert, and we have to keep expanding the right, not in terms of the weeks of gestation for which the abortion is available, but we have to fight for socio-economic right of the abortion, where the system remains open, non-discriminatory, and provides economic support to the woman who is seeking abortion. Then and then, what you are talking about, the problems in the abortion seeking can be overcome.
There is other side to it, that because of this liberal abortion, we also have a sex selective abortions available in and now in the post-pandemic period they have increased. I would like Dr. Sanjida Arora to come in because the question of POCSO and the compulsory mandatory reporting, how does it impact teenage pregnancy and the women who are the girls who are facing this crisis, and it's also hazardous for the young girls. Yeah.
So, as I mean, we all know that POCSO criminalizes any sexual activity under 18, even if it is consensual in nature. And because of this, a lot of times adolescents reaching to the health facilities, they face a lot of barriers in accessing the abortion. Uh, there is mandatory obligation for the healthcare providers to report those cases to the police. So, there is a conflict between POCSO and what MTP Act says. So, MTP Act says that you have to protect the confidentiality of women, or the girls accessing the safe abortion. But under POCSO, there is an obligation of mandatory reporting. So a lot of times what we have seen in our work with the health system, that adolescents, they run away from these health facilities the moment they come to know that their case will be reported to the police, without accessing abortion. And you know so a lot of time this ends up in either continuing pregnancy, or ending up having unsafe abortion. At the level of the healthcare provider also, they face a lot of ethical and legal dilemmas, whether to uh, ensure the right to healthcare for the women and the girls, or to fulfill their legal obligation. So I mean, these are the challenges faced by the adolescents when they approach health facilities. And also to add that recently, I mean, from a lot of civil society organization, there is a shift, and advocacy for self-managed abortions. And a recent I think 2022 study showed that a lot of abortions in India are self-managed, and there is also emerging evidence on it. And given the situation of the law and the conflict between the laws, uh, you know, most of the civil society organizations are, shifting the narrative towards self-managed abortion, and also myth busting, and also to work with the healthcare providers and creating champions within the healthcare providers, so that they navigate the obligation by law, and also at the same time ensure the right to healthcare for the adolescents. Yeah.
Can you elaborate self-managed abortion? What does it mean with example? Yeah.
So as Dr. Amar was saying, that there is a lot of evidence that by using the medical pills, which are, which can be accessed through pharmacy, and the girls and the women can manage the abortion if they are within the certain gestation period at home itself, without approaching, the health facility. Because a lot of times, as also mentioned in the question by Asta, that socio-cultural barriers and the stigma around accessing the abortion are the challenges faced by women and the girls to access abortion. So when we say that the self-managed abortions, which are mostly happening at the home, uh, I mean, there is a possibility, I mean, it provides an opportunity for women to overcome that challenge of, socio-cultural norms and the stigma around accessing the abortion. I mean, in public hospitals, a lot of times, even if, the abortion can be managed through a pill rather than through a surgery, the healthcare providers insist on admission for a day or two within the hospital. And this also deters a lot of women, to access abortion, and then they end up, continuing pregnancy, or, spending 3 times more for accessing abortion from the private providers. Yeah. I mean, these are the, practices from the healthcare providers to, which are not rational, to make sure that, the women doesn't end up with the bleeding or something, and they want her to get admitted in the hospital and stay there for 2 or 3 days, even if she is eligible for a medical abortion rather than a surgical abortion. These are all defensive practices, by the providers. And it's important that if we are working with the providers, we need to, build their understanding about the law, also about the I mean, barriers faced by the women in accessing the abortion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please adjust your screen. Yeah. We are now, another related question, I think, is about the Sanju Singh. Sanju Singh asked that how can women emancipate? How can women emancipated in the rural areas? Can you share your experience of taking the Lhasa model of Mumbai to the Marathwada region and share your experiences? Yeah.
I think, in the rural areas, the key for women empowerment is, through economic empowerment and, increased participation in the local governance systems. So we have enough evidence from, the self-help groups, which are important platforms for women generate income or microfinancing. And these platforms not only help in economic empowerment, but are also important platforms for addressing domestic violence. There is emerging evidence to say that these platforms provide a safe space to women to share their experiences of domestic violence, and also recognize that how this is a violation of their rights, and then decide and take steps towards addressing this violence. The other important thing I said, that increased participation in the local governance system. So the more we include women, in I would say gender budgeting of the local development committees, like we have village health, nutrition, sanitation committee. They have dedicated the budget for development of the villages, where they're looking at sanitation, health, and the nutrition. So if there are more women included in these committees, and also their voices are given importance, so they can bring transformative changes within the infrastructure and the availability of the services, as far as it is concerned from women's perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the question of honor crime, I think that there is a question by from Roshan Ara, that please comment upon how honor killing can be put to an end. One thing I can say about Maharashtra is that there are so many cases of intercaste and interreligious marriages among young professionals. And now, after a lot of effort by the human rights organizations, now we have a safe space. So the state at least takes responsibility. Some of the states have also come up with the budgeting, because when they have a choice-based marriage, they are abandoned by both the parents, like the girls' side as well as boys' side. So to begin their new life, there is a budgetary provision. As so far as the SCP plan is there, the scheduled caste plan, the budget also gets utilized 100%. That also shows that increasing number of choice-based marriages are taking place. But I think honor crime is a very important concern for all South Asian countries and South Asian settled in other countries, because there too, even in London, you have a bounty hunters whose job is just to police the young boys and girls, and if they happen to be from different community or different race, then they report to the parents, and then a lot of violence takes place, sometimes even killing. Dr. Vahida, would you like to share your experiences? Yeah.
I would concur with what you have said, that one way to avoid it is to provide support services to individuals who, who are in inter-religion situation, inter-religion, intercaste, whatever is prohibited relationships, that they are provided the support systems and protection. And the system must consider when it occurs as a serious crime, that that it's a crime which is has a law and order implication, and must be treated as such, and not justified because it is the parents who do it or the family who do it in any way, that they were provoked into it. Being in an prohibited relationship is no provocation for committing honor crimes. So I think more support, and as you have
we don't have law. We only have some landmark judgments. We still don't have a law prohibiting or criminalizing honor crimes.
No, there is no law. That's why I'm saying. So what are honor crimes? The effort to kill the woman or the man, the effort to throw acid over the woman, the effort to injure the man in some way. All of these are crimes within the IPC. There is an assault provision, there is a murder provision, there is an attempt to murder provision, there is an attempt to murder of If in the SC/ST Act also there are laws. So I'm not sure that we need more laws. What we need is for the law enforcement to treat them
But
as
always we have
as
seen,
crime.
no, that custodial crimes where you are in custody of your parents, nobody speaks. Women's movement also from the beginning we have talked against dowry murders or domestic violence or violence in the matrimonial home, intimate partners violence. But natal family violence only after the queer movement raised this issue and the public hearing and testimonies of the LGBTQIA community started happening now in last 2-3 years, only after the post-COVID period, that natal family violence, that your own biological family members,
Biological
they kill
family
you, no?
violence. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
but even in the Domestic Violence Act, there is provision of not just intimate partner, but of other members of family, violence against women is included. No, any kind of other brother or others also is included as a situation.
No,
So
and
I
now the
think
kind of cases that you have, like if you see just a woman, she cuts her hair and a brother kills
yes,
her, or
yes.
she wears spaghetti stripe and
Or this
some uncle
recent
comes
case,
and kills her. So it's
this
not
race
only
case
not
about
having affair also. If she doesn't have affair, she's studious, she has good academic record, but what she wears, how she dresses, how
dresses, all those are reason for this. Or for example, somebody had a YouTube channel and it was, doing well also, and then the
Haryana.
uncle had a problem and shot her dead. So those are kinds of, so on these are all situations of honor crime coming from the thing that she is dishonoring the family, the family name and all of that. And all of that needs to be treated as these are all part of crimes that come out of a patriarchal society, the concept of honor and that honor resting in the bodies of a woman, so that needs to consistently
Young men
question.
also, the equal number of young men are also losing their lives. When
Yeah.
it comes to custodial crime, both of them are victims.
Yeah, no. In terms of inter-religious relationship thing, it's definitely targeting particularly of the men also. How many Dalit men have been put under the railway tracks because they got married to an upper caste or is in love with or was found talking to or sitting with them, in a restaurant, whatever. So those kinds of violence definitely.
Interreligious.
Yeah. So I think there is way, but what is happening is the system within the police and the law enforcement also there suffers from the same prejudices and biases. No? And so their inability, therefore, to enforce the law as it should be, because these are nothing but serious cases of assault, of attempted murder, and if it is person is but the point is the same, no? As you say, implementation is difficult when the perpetrator is having some standing in the society, whether it is because of their caste or their class or the family structure, and that is so one we need to keep pushing for proper implementation and characterization of these crimes. And I think that will help. Yeah.
In Maharashtra, there is one village where the council has unanimously decided that all those who are facing violence from natal family, they are welcome to sit and they would help them find job, and they should at least just mingle with the villagers, and they are ready to accommodate them. It's some socialist leader, he had started this movement, and that place is open to them. Yeah.
We need
So
more such initiatives, I guess.
yeah. Anyone else who would like to share or speak? 1 minute. There are any very informative session we know seeing, and then I think all we have taken care of. Yeah. Fine. I think we can now close. We have exceeded time limit. Yeah. Yes, Ayush.
We are deep. Yes, sir. We are deeply grateful to all our panelists for this insightful discussion. Thank you to the participants for your thoughtful questions and active engagement. Now, I would like to invite a chair to deliver the closing remarks.
Yeah, I think we are now, after the 50 years of United Nations Declaration of International Women's Day, where they were talking about equality, development, and peace. And women's groups, they said, when they were talking about world peace, we said that peace begins from home. And women's movement also said that personal is political and political is personal. And they had been shouting, screaming, street fighting, organizing rallies, demonstrations, petitions, giving petitions in a global platform at a sub-regional and national level. Struggles were happening. We had a very important rally in 1980, encircling the Parliament of India for the justice to Mathura, and nationwide anti-rape movement that began. And we have seen that slowly and gradually, at a ground level, lot of things are happening. And now also at an individual level, we see young professional like Dr. Sanjida Arora dedicating her life to the one-stop crisis center. So we are going beyond taking up the emergency issues of in the rallies and picketing, but we are also providing institutional support to women in social distress in different forms. So that has been the important qualitative leap we have in terms of support to the survivors of violence. Also taking it up on a diplomatic and political platforms regarding the whole question of war, conflict, and also the violence that women have to face, recognition of that. I think our panelists have highlighted how the WPS agenda, Dr. Vahida Nainar, Dr. Chenoy also talked about the WPS agenda, and women and girls around the world are still, we see that their child marriages are still on, the percentage has gone down by half. Trafficking into the forced labor or forced sex slavery, that has increased after the pandemic because of the economic crisis. But we also see at one level, women are entering into early male bastions. We also see the mafia, mafia politics, and also money power, masculine power also is using the weapons of curbing women. And patriarchal value system is like octopus. You remove one tentacle and other tentacles, they try to grip it. So grip the women's lives and suffocate it. So it's very important that we continuously bring this issue on the public platform. We raise our voice, we stick out our neck wherever we are, we take stand. If we feel the fear of retaliation, at least use the social media, inform the criminal justice system or the women's organizations what is about this incidences of violence, and come out with the alternative. When it comes to the global platform, I think whether it is a Gaza or Ukraine or other 48 places where the conflicts are on, and we are getting now, because of Instagram and because of Facebook and because of YouTube, we are also getting so many heartrending and very, very, very disturbing videos, and we just can't be the voyeurist who watch these videos. We have to take stand. So around the world, the deaths related to pregnancy and childbirth, which are needlessly high, that means that is related to systemic violence. Women are prevented from making deeply personal choices in the private lives, which is about honor crimes. And also we have seen that when you reduce the budgetary allocation for social sector, you also reduce the support services. That is why we have to link these issues of women's rights to human rights, to the material reality, to the political economy, to the macroeconomic framework. And we have to tell all the global institutions also not to impose inhuman conditionality into the developing world of reducing the social sector budget, because the budget for support to survivors of the violence, or support for right to education, right to health, right to skilling, right to safe environment, right to safe mobility, all that is linked to budgetary allocation of the nation states, and that goes from the social sector budget. So from micro to meso to macro level, everywhere we have to bring this perspective, because otherwise what we will be doing is that when there is a big calamity, we are just offering some small little help, no? So that should not happen. When you need a surgery, you just can't, cataract surgery, you can't deal with it with drop of eye drops, no? So it is very important that we all, as citizens, as policymakers, as educationists, as researchers, as journalists, as bureaucrats, And as students and youth, we all have to consider and constantly remind ourselves that women's rights are human rights through our action. It is not a question of just slogan or platitude. It has to be integral part of our universe, of our life worlds. Thank you very much. And I thank IMPRI team, especially Priyanka Negiji and also Ayush Verma, who is moderating this session. And over to Ayush.
Thank you, ma'am. With this, I would like to proceed to a formal vote of thanks. As we conclude this panel discussion on women's rights or human rights, I, Ayush Verma, on behalf of IMPRI, Gender Impact Study Center, New Delhi, extend my heartfelt gratitude. Our deepest thanks to our chair and expert for today. Thank you all, our esteemed panelists, for this insightful and thought-provoking addresses. Your expertise and perspective has greatly enriched today's discussion and provided us with valuable takeaways on the critical topic. We deeply appreciate your time and contribution. We also thank all participants who joined us live, raised pertinent questions, and contributed to today's dialogue. For those watching later on YouTube channel, listening to our podcast or reading our publication, we deeply value your engagement and interest. We hope to continue to join. We hope you continue to join in future IMPRI Web Talk and Web Policy Learning programs. Thank you. Wishing you all a great evening ahead.
Yeah. Heartfelt thanks to all the panelists. So I know all of them are extremely busy. This is a very important day for all of us. So Dr. Vahida Nainar, Dr. Chenoy, Dr. Sanjida Arora, and Dr. Amar Jesani, and the esteemed participants. I can see from their name, I know many of them, and they have been doing a valuable work, and salute to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to IMPRI and everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.